The Lenape Kingdom, stretching across what we now call Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and parts of New York, was a thriving powerhouse long before Europeans ever set foot on these shores. Their influence shaped the land and its people for centuries. The Lenape weren't simply waiting to be discovered. They had already built a vibrant civilization called Lenapehoking. Manhattan, now a global metropolis, was once a bustling Lenape center, alive with trade, diplomacy, and daily life. The name Lenape means the real people, a bold declaration of identity and belonging. It was a name that carried pride, history, and a sense of purpose. Their society was a network of self-governing communities, each with its own leaders, yet united by language, tradition, and a worldview that saw spirit in every river, tree, and stone. Their connection to the land was spiritual and practical, woven into every aspect of life. To the Lenape, land wasn't something to be owned or divided, but respected and cared for, a mindset that would soon clash with European ideas of property and conquest. When Dutch and Swedish traders arrived, they didn't find a primitive people, but a sophisticated society with its own rules, customs, and thriving economy. The Lenape were strategic thinkers, seeing newcomers as potential partners, not conquerors, at least at first. They welcomed trade and dialogue, always weighing the risks and rewards. They managed complex alliances and trade networks, leveraging their position as expert negotiators and skilled diplomats in a rapidly changing world. But as settlers encroached further, the Lenape didn't hesitate to defend their home. They used guerrilla tactics, deep knowledge of the land, and unity to resist outside threats. Through storytelling, ceremony, and the passing down of traditions, they maintained their cultural identity under immense pressure, ensuring their legacy would endure. The Lenape were never passive. They were resilient, resourceful, and always ready to fight for their world, their people, and their future. With Dutch, Swedes, and English all vying for control in the region, the early days of colonization were a chaotic scramble for power and influence. In the midst of this, the Lenape became master diplomats, skillfully navigating the ambitions of these competing European powers. They played colonial rivals against each other, trading furs and food for tools, textiles, and other valuable goods, always keeping their options open and never tying themselves to just one side. Think of them as the most popular kid in school, never picking sides, always in demand, and always at the center of attention. Their power came from making sure no single European group dominated Lenapehoking, their ancestral homeland, and from maintaining a delicate balance between all the newcomers. Lenape leaders navigated treaties and trade in multiple languages, leveraging their control over coveted resources like land, waterways, and trade routes to keep the colonists dependent on their goodwill. If one group pushed too hard or tried to take too much, the Lenape simply shifted alliances, making it clear that cooperation was a privilege, not a guarantee. This strategy preserved their autonomy and kept colonists off balance, forcing Europeans to constantly negotiate and adapt to Lenape terms. For a crucial period, the Lenape shaped the region's future, not as victims, but as cunning strategists who understood the power of negotiation and timing. But as settler populations grew and more land was claimed, the balance slowly tipped away from the Lenape. The Europeans' hunger for land was relentless, and the diplomatic dance that once kept peace became a fight for survival as pressure mounted on Lenape territory. Still, the Lenape's political savvy and adaptability bought them precious time, allowing their communities to endure and resist for longer than many others. Their resistance was a masterclass in adaptation and defiance, showing that even in the face of overwhelming odds, strategy and unity could make all the difference. When treaties were ignored and settlers pushed deeper, the Lenape switched from diplomacy to defense. They didn't fight European-style battles. They used the land itself as their weapon. Hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and psychological warfare made encroachment dangerous and costly. Colonists, unfamiliar with the terrain, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. The Lenape's deep ecological knowledge allowed them to appear and vanish like ghosts. These weren't random attacks, they were calculated acts of resistance. The message was clear. This land has a history, a people, and a price for its theft. The forests of Pennsylvania and New Jersey became a maze for invaders. For a time, this strategy slowed colonial expansion and protected Lenape sovereignty. European accounts called it savagery, but it was disciplined defense of home and culture. The Lenape proved they were fierce, not broken. By the 1670s, English settlers were overrunning the Delaware River Valley, ignoring boundaries and treaties. The Lenape drew a line, literally and figuratively, organizing a coordinated stand in 1675. This wasn't scattered raiding, it was unified resistance targeting the colonial frontier. They combined military tactics with intimate knowledge of the land, making expansion perilous for settlers. The Delaware River Valley became a contested, dangerous frontier. The Lenape's stand forced colonial authorities to recognize their power, if only briefly. Though outnumbered and outgunned, they inflicted real setbacks on colonial ambitions. This conflict became a legendary chapter of Lenape resistance. It showed their capacity for unity and their unwavering commitment to their homeland. While they couldn't stop colonization forever, their defiance bought time and respect. The Lenape never surrendered their land quietly, they fought for every inch. The walking purchase of 1737 was colonial land theft at its most audacious, a scheme that would forever alter the fate of the Lenape people and the landscape of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania authorities claimed a dubious treaty allowed them as much land as a man could walk in a day and a half, a vague promise twisted to their advantage. The Lenape imagined a leisurely stroll, a fair and honest walk through the woods. But the colonists had other plans, staging a marathon by clearing paths ahead of time and hiring the fastest runners they could find. The result was staggering. 1.2 million acres, an area the size of Rhode Island, was seized in a single rigged walk. The land grab was unprecedented in its scale and deception. Lenape leaders protested, calling the deal a sham and a betrayal of trust, but their voices were ignored by colonial officials determined to expand their territory. To enforce the theft, colonists manipulated the Lenape's Iroquois allies, pressuring them to order the Lenape's eviction and turning former friends into enforcers of colonial will. By 1741, the Lenape were forced from their homeland, driven out by legal trickery, political betrayal, and the relentless push of colonial expansion. The walking purchase became a symbol of how indigenous land was stolen not just by force, but by fraud, through forged documents, broken promises, and calculated deceit. It was a devastating blow, severing the Lenape from the fertile Lehigh Valley, a place they had called home for generations, and scattering their communities. The event stands as a stark reminder. Colonial conquest was as much about paperwork, manipulation, and legal maneuvering as it was about brute power and violence. The Lenape's fury and resistance echoed long after the ink dried, a testament to their enduring spirit and the deep injustice of the walking purchase. Military defeat and land theft didn't end Lenape resistance, it transformed it. As their territory shrank, they fortified their culture, language, ceremonies, and stories became their new homeland. Elders became living libraries, passing down traditions and histories as blueprints for survival. Ceremonies like the Big House became vital, uniting the community and preserving identity. Adaptation was key, some married into colonial families, others hid their traditions in plain sight. The Lenape bent but never broke, blending new ideas with old values. This quiet defiance kept their spirit alive through generations of trauma. Colonists could steal land, but not the Lenape's sense of self. Their cultural resilience became the foundation for survival. In the end, identity proved the most powerful resistance of all. Colonization brought invisible enemies, diseases like smallpox and measles, that devastated Lenape communities. Their population plummeted, villages vanished, and the social fabric was torn apart. Weakened, the Lenape were forced into a brutal series of westward migrations from Pennsylvania to Oklahoma. Each move was a new trauma, severing ties to ancestral lands and creating refugees in their own homeland. Place names remained, but the people were pushed ever farther away. This was a deliberate strategy of erasure, removing the people to claim the land. Yet, the Lenape carried their homeland in memory and story. Remembering became resistance, a way to survive forced forgetting. Even in distant places, they remained the people of the Delaware River Valley. The fight to remember kept their identity alive against all odds. The assault on the Lenape shifted from land to identity with the federal Indian boarding school system. Schools like Carlisle in Pennsylvania aimed to kill the Indian, save the man, stripping children of language, culture, and family. Lenape children were taken, punished for speaking their language, and forced into harsh discipline and labor. Abuse, neglect, and trauma were rampant. Many children never returned home. Survivors were left between worlds, carrying deep wounds that haunted generations. This was a calculated campaign of cultural erasure, targeting the youngest to break the chain of tradition. Yet even here, resistance endured. Children whispered their language in secret, clung to memories, and survived. The boarding school era is a dark chapter but also a testament to Lenape resilience. Their fight to reclaim what was stolen continues today. Despite centuries of war, displacement, and forced assimilation, the Lenape story is far from over. Today, Lenape nations thrive in Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Canada, and beyond, with vibrant movements for cultural revival and recognition. In Pennsylvania, the heart of Lenapehoking, groups campaign for long overdue acknowledgement. The resistance now takes the form of language classes, cultural fairs, and legal battles. Events like the Inda Lenape Walking Fair and the Rising Nation River Journey reconnect Lenape with their ancestral lands. As Curtis Zuniga says, "We have something valuable to bring to the table, we just want to be welcomed back." The legacy of Lenape resistance is one of tenacity and memory. Their story is a living movement, not a closed chapter. The real people are still here, defiant and proud. Their fight for land, culture, and future continues, unbroken and unfinished.